Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Super License F1 podcast. My name's Rodney.
And my name is Zach.
I always worry while that music is playing that people are going to hear me swallowing and breathing and getting ready to speak. I hope that's not the case, and if so, I apologize profusely. Zach, how are you going, my friend?
Well, I always wonder, I always think that somehow the microphone's going to pick up on my dancing. I always dance a little bit, just going to get myself in the zone, amp myself up for the podcast.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like we come in cold. There's always a little bit of pre-show chat, but you know, you gotta get all vibing, especially when I look out the window and it's just like miserable rain and just dark and cold and it's winter and it's here. But other than that, I'm fine. You know, how are you going? I never ask you. How are you, Rod?
Thanks for asking. Yeah, I'm fine.
Oh, that was easy.
Obviously, brilliant news recently in Melbourne. Lockdown kind of starting to relax. Very mindful that that's not the case in lots of the rest of the world. Feeling really sorry for people in places like Italy where cases are spiking, and they're like, we know there's a race coming up, but we've sold tickets and everything, but you may not be able to go. Sorry. So yeah, very, very happy for what's happening in Melbourne, and you know, it's been really tough here. And
hard work being paid off, right?
Yes, the sacrifice and the investment in what lays ahead has been done, but obviously, yes, very mindful too that that's not the case everywhere. So our thoughts go out to everyone who's doing it tough. But Zach, also the other thing I think we should do before we get into anything else too much. Normally, if a driver wins a championship or some other momentous thing happens, we usually just get straight into it. We don't fuck around. So we should probably just do that here as well. Lewis Hamilton becomes the winningest Formula One driver ever. Absolutely claiming his spot at the top of the list with 92 race wins, pulling clear of Michael Schumacher. So yeah, let's eulogize, not in the way of someone who's dead, in the way you speak well of someone. Let's do that now.
Yeah.
Pretty good effort.
I would say it's an immense effort. It's funny. We always knew he was good, right? Because he came in and came second in the championship almost immediately.
Yeah.
Basically, and everybody was already talking about him. That's how everybody revises their own personal history, right? Every F1 pundit was like, "Oh yeah, you know, we'd had our eyes on Lewis Hamilton for ages. The moment he came out of the womb, we were like, there's a racer." But I suppose, you know, the chat more recently has been, well, we know the Mercedes dominance isn't really going away, and Lewis Hamilton is currently in negotiations on a new contract. You can't imagine him going and racing anywhere else. It's really up to Lewis, it seems, of how long does he want to be in Formula One, because he says he's got other things he'd like to go and accomplish in his life. He's still a young man, on the whole scheme of things. So, you know, if he races for another 2-3 seasons, there's another 20 wins in most likely, right?
Oh, yeah.
At least. So how high will this watermark be? I can't really put into words how it's not just the fact that he rolls up to every weekend and we kind of assume that he will perform really well. It's just how unassailable his ability is, that even on a weekend where like more recently with Valtteri Bottas has been incredibly quick in qualifying and just doesn't seem to have it in the race. But Lewis Hamilton just consistently brings his best racing. And he seems to be the complete package. There was talk during this weekend that he can do tire management as well. You know, he can drive a car when it's almost undrivable. He will say that it's undrivable and will complain about it, but so does every single F1 driver. In fact, as we've been more exposed to the radio communications of teams, we hear that every driver whinges and complains about how bad their tires are, how bad the car feels, all that kind of stuff. It's part of their job, seemingly, and complains about strategy and has input. And so, you know, Lewis Hamilton can drive in really bad racing circumstances, can drive under immense personal and professional pressure, and has overcome all of those things to continue to be amazing. And he hasn't seen the fall off in his ability like we saw or we've seen with, you know, say Lewis Hamilton or Jenson Button or even Kimi Räikkönen to a certain extent. I mean, Kimi Räikkönen's 400 years old, so that might not matter. But essentially, you can throw anything at Lewis Hamilton and he will respond. And we've seen it through his career with drives from the back and drives in the wet. I am constantly amazed at how consistently he performs at the best of his ability. And I think he knows, as we've seen probably a little bit more recently as well, is that he can do it on Sunday, and that's when it matters. You know, he doesn't care about being fastest in practice. Why would he? He just knows that regardless of the situation, he can grind out a win or at least a really high points paying position I was going back through some of his records for some. Just I was looking at his race history essentially,
just for nothing.
Well, yeah, and kind of comparing him to Vettel as well, and the seasons where and the seasons where he is, he might not win. Like when he doesn't win, he comes second. Like there is no it's seemingly he just doesn't. He doesn't have as many reliability issues, but he also doesn't seem to have as many crashes. He's just it's amazing.
Got for the Formula One, the official Formula One account just tweeted out not long ago a list of his records. Do you want to hear some of them?
Yeah, please.
I'll take a deep breath. Most race wins, most poles, most podiums, most consecutive starts, most races led from start to finish, most front row starts, most career points, most points finishes, most points in a season, most points in a debut season, most wins at a home Grand Prix, most circuits won at, most different GPs won, most circuits taking pole, most different GPs taking pole, most different GPs with podium finish, consecutive seasons with a win since debut, most consecutive seasons with a pole position, most consecutive points finishes, period, most consecutive podiums from debut going forward, most consecutive races led, most consecutive races finished, longest time between first and last world titles, youngest world championship leader, and most wins in a calendar month. So he's done pretty okay. Yeah,
you don't want to go on a 5-minute rant like I did?
Well, I mean, I was trying to get a word in edgeways, but couldn't. Jesus. The problem becomes, as always, as soon as you start saying, man, this guy's, it's unarguable. The numbers are stacked in his favor. He's the greatest of all time. And then there's always some anorak who's like, you can't compare drivers across the, and it's like, yeah, I know. So this is sort of, it's a mute point, but it is a time to celebrate, his achievement. And I think for me, the biggest achievement Hamilton has achieved is just the last couple of years where he's not just won sort of 4 or 5 championships, but really developed into someone who has something to say that's, in my opinion, quite worthwhile, but also continued to look for ways that he can improve his driving, because I think you could probably look at someone like Sebastian Vettel and say, he was in the fastest car, but then maybe didn't necessarily do the same job that Hamilton has done in looking for ways to improve his racecraft in all areas. And I think that's been on display this week, which I don't want to preempt comments for later in the race discussion. But yeah, I think this week really showed the ways that he tries to improve himself. They pay off dividends down the line. He hasn't just fluked his way to all of these records. It's been incredible talent with a bit of good luck, rather than a little bit of talent and a heap of good luck.
Yeah, and in an immense car. There's no doubt about that, and I think people will constantly look at that 2016 season when Rosberg beat him and be like, well, it's 2 great races in one great team, and that's, you can kind of see what happened. I think that Lewis probably learnt from that season as well, that consistency is the thing. You need to be, there are no races where you can be like, oh, it hasn't really gone my way, I'll finish 7th. It's like, no, you need to finish 3rd on those days, because you need every single point. And that's what's that's why even we've seen it when he's been leading the championship by so much, he still just turns up and tries to win every single race. And that's the admirable quality, I think, is that he might not necessarily be thinking about the records, but he desperately wants to be the best racer every single weekend. And I think he's left no doubt.
I mean, it wasn't that long ago, less than a year, that we were on a podcast with some friends of ours doing an interview show. And I said something like, we shouldn't be thinking about Lewis as winning 6 or 7 championships. We should be thinking about 9 or 10. And some people, when naming names, Rob James, scoffed and said, no, that's far-fetched. But, here he is knocking on the door of 7. You could pencil his name in for 8. We're talking about possible engine development freezes for a couple more years, depending on how the Red Bull stuff goes. So, I mean, literally, 9 is so achievable, and 10 is really, dare to dream, because 10 could happen. I don't think that's crazy at all.
What? Yeah, no, I don't think so either. What is it about his position at Mercedes that, how come there's seemingly none of the other things that affect winningest drivers in that sense? That there's no push to move him on and get in new young blood. There's no disharmony within the team. There's nothing else that he really seems to want to achieve. There's no push for him to go to a Ferrari or something like that and be like, I'm going to bring up their stocks too and drive with them. Everything just seems so incredibly settled. That's what makes it seem like this relationship could just go on forever, right? That he could, until something disrupts it. and it doesn't look like anything will. Why is that, do you think, with Lewis?
I think that he feels that Mercedes is just a great fit for him, because we heard early on after going there that, you know, he would go to them and say, look, I need to go and blow off steam between races. Is it cool if I fly out after the race and go to Paris Fashion Week or something? And they were like, you do whatever you need to do to be the best on track, as opposed to other teams that might have been like, don't do anything risky and focus on racing. And I think that he obviously felt then that was a brilliant fit for him, and he probably owes to some degree some of his success to that mentality. Not necessarily that example, but the whole package of how they work together. And I think he's probably pushed them to develop that kind of culture in the team. You could easily look at other teams like Red Bull, even Ferrari, and say, why on earth would you want to leave Mercedes to go there, even just from a racing culture point of view, rather than the car or whatever. So I mean, I think that's part of it, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, good on Mercedes for constantly just being like, yeah, we want the best racer at our team, and we'll pay you whatever it takes to pay you, and make sure you have a good, you know, whatever it takes to keep you, and they value the relationship obviously as well. It's not something that can never be, really, since Bottas was put in there, there's been I can't think of any times when Mercedes hasn't appeared as like a solid, like, yep, we are one big racing family and we love being here. You know, it's that true. Level of consistency in F1 is, I mean, that comes with winning and turning up every week and everything being amazing. I know that's not always the case, but yeah, it does. Yeah, there's nothing, doesn't seem like anything can really disrupt Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes at this point. And I think they're probably wise to just keep giving Bottas contracts. As long as he keeps coming second, it's not really a problem, right?
Yeah, totally. Well, there is a whole other rest of the show that we should do. So the only other thing I wanted to bring up maybe before we get into the race is that, like, we did an episode of Shakedown on, I think it goes out on Wednesday for most people. And right after that, there was this chain of insane developments, things that happened in the Formula One world between us releasing that episode and even like qualifying. There was like 5 huge stories. So I don't know, how to address that. I don't know whether we should address that. Some of that we have to address, but I don't know how to fit it in, because the rest of it is like, let's talk about the race. Let's do the quiz. But where do we fit in these other weird things? It's like, I don't know. Any ideas, Zach?
I mean, it depends. Sometimes these things just kind of peter themselves out. Well, what do you want?
I can go over them.
One out of all of them. Why don't you hit them all, and then we'll decide what we want to talk about.
Yeah, let me just hit them all, and we'll just see what happens. So the first one, Lance Stroll having COVID. Second one, Haas dumping both their drivers. The third one, Vitaly Petrov being announced as the steward and Hamilton not being impressed because of his comments and attitudes towards Black Lives Matter and similar things. Then Stroll and Verstappen tangling, and Verstappen throwing these incredible, ridiculous racial slurs at him on the radio. And then Petrov having to step away as a steward because of a personal bereavement, which is being reported as his father being assassinated in his home in Russia. I mean, what are 4 days in the world of Formula One? And that's not even the racing.
Yeah, that's, we would be able to make a meal of that, dine out for that,
we would.
Dine out on that forever. I think the notable ones are all of them. I think we can talk about Haas at the end of the race notes.
Yes, we can get to that. That's true.
Yeah, let's
I
come
think
to Haas.
The Verstappen one in particular is one that we have to address, I think. And I don't know if it's really Verstappen and Perez had an incident during the race, but the practice incident where Stroll, it seems, was changing dials on his car or something. Didn't see Verstappen coming up. They pull into a corner and they crash. Verstappen starts swearing, calling him fucking idiot, and then throws in these things like this guy's a Mongol and these other weird, he's trying to put him down.
Those kinds of
retard,
things,
exactly. So I mean, it's not only some kind of ridiculous ableist, derogatory comment, but then also for it to have a racial angle at the same time that, before every race, all the drivers stand there and we have to sit through this tedious montage of drivers saying, I stand against equality. And it's like, yeah, we get it. But I mean, at the same time, you're standing there, you're wearing the t-shirts, and that has to mean something when you say you want to end racism. And then you just say stupid things like that. And I just don't know about this guy in general. Yeah, I'm telling you, some serious doubt is being cast in my mind about Max Verstappen right now.
Yeah, he's childish. I mean, there is sometimes in Formula One, and I think with overconfidence and kind of the close-knit ties of teams and those kinds of things, you get glimpses of people's true character, but also at times of immense stress as well. And that's not to make an excuse for any, horrible thing that a driver has done or said. But Max Verstappen lacks tact always. And I don't think he cares. And he said afterwards, I don't care if people are offended by what I say. It's like, that's the problem. And that's, I'm not going to make this into a big, like, hey, there's a political movement in Europe that doesn't accept and doesn't like the idea of limits on free speech, all that kind of stuff. That's all bullshit in my mind. This is just a guy who lives in a bubble.
Yeah.
And that's it. And I don't mean a COVID bubble. I mean like I'm a Formula One privileged next greatest thing bubble. He'll never be challenged, himself, and doesn't seem to care, if he offends people. And that's not really okay and not a good look for Formula One, but Formula One is kind of like that anyway. Formula One doesn't really mind if it offends people. It goes to petrostates, and countries and states that have dubious, human rights, histories, and just kind of glosses over and ignores them. And I'm sure Formula One would love to just gloss over and ignore this from Verstappen as well.
But that's almost part of it. Like if Formula One said, we're actually going to decide as a sport not to go to those kinds of places, it might just get through to people like Max Verstappen who race in the sport. Never thought about that. Yeah, I guess that's bad. Maybe, sometimes it just takes those things to awaken people. Because Red Bull, especially Christian Horner right after was like, he was very emotional and he was really worked up. And it's like, well, fine. But explain why after, when he's cooled down, he's like, well, I don't care. And what I said stands. He said similar things, not the racial part, but the ableist part about like race stewards a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And then I was tweeting about this saying, we're going to be talking about this on the podcast a little bit. And someone said, yeah, it's worth having a look at who Verstappen follows on Twitter. So I had a bit of a look. And there's like far right politicians,
of course, that
he follows. And it's like, you didn't follow them in a moment of frustration and anger. And it's like, that's a conscious thing you're doing. And it's not like a joke follow because he doesn't follow any other politicians whatsoever. It's like scrolling through a horny teenager's Twitter follow list. It's all Instagram models or race car drivers. That's it. And then there's one guy who's been dubbed the Dutch Donald Trump, which gives you a real idea of who he is. Yeah,
and this is not something that I think that people like to think about too much about the they like seeing the kind of hand waving from their sports people because sport is an escape for people. I like to escape the world going on, pandemic, conservative movements across the world kind of taking us backwards in whatever progression we've made as a society, and sport can offer this like, okay, well, maybe it exists in a bubble it is in a vacuum, but it's not because sport is politicized. We've had this conversation before. So Max Verstappen doesn't really talk about politics and like that in his interviews or anything like that, but we got a glimpse, and you can do a little bit more digging on the people that maybe you support or like, and you can like and support their achievements and what they represent in a sport. But I think it's also worth understanding what kinds of people we allow to be part of our world and the things that we choose to entertain us. And, I don't want that in my sport. And, the fans are in part custodians of the sport. And if Max Verstappen feels like he can just kind of do and say whatever he likes, then that should show you as a fan of the sport how he probably thinks of you.
That's part of it, I think. Excusing it is not worse than the actual attitude itself. But it can't be not held to account, and it can't be just let slip. And, the thing is, there's obviously some people who look at Lewis Hamilton and go, man, why doesn't he just shut up and stop making these political statements? And why can't he just keep it about racing? There's obviously people on the other side. Vitaly Petrov, obviously one of them. But I was thinking about this recently because we talked about what a slippery slope it is to allow people to make political comments about Formula One and use it as a platform for political comments because it's a double-edged sword. But at the same time, there needs to be some kind of recognition that like some are just generally good and some are just generally not. The problem becomes, well, who's the arbitrator of that? Surely if you're arguing for, equal rights or world hunger or whatever it is, anything that's like just kind of unequivocally good, you can surely just give that a pass.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we are It's what we're seeing with Marcus Rashford in the UK, campaigning against child poverty and child hunger. I mean, these were the somewhat altruistic endeavours. But people would argue that, he's not bringing it up while he's playing football, but but he's using his platform to do that. And we're getting maybe it's a false equivalency, because it's not like Max Verstappen is standing up being like, I think that these people are less human than me. He's not saying that.
Well, the people that he follows are saying literally exactly that. But look, that's not to say that he's saying that, but it's a nod in that direction, isn't it?
Yeah.
Worrying. Anyway, look, but that's probably 50 minutes or something. 20 minutes. Bloody hell. All right. I don't know. Do you have any last thoughts about that, or should we just move on?
I want to talk about a different way that teams can show disrespect, or racers can show disrespect for the sport and their colleagues and the people around them and the fans in the Lance Stroll situation, because it sounds like, and maybe we should talk about the timeline here, but he definitely had COVID, and it's so weird that his doctor was like, these don't feel like COVID symptoms. Let's not. And he tested negative yesterday, so he's probably negative today. It's like, oh, all right. That's a bit odd. And the rest of the teams, after Formula One had given Racing Point like a warning or a reprimand or nothing, essentially, no penalty at all, kind of tightened up the requirements and restrictions. The other teams are like, that's not great, though.
What? Yeah.
How did you read this?
I was incensed, and I spent a lot of time trying to put together the timeline from everything that everyone had been saying, including Lance Stroll, including Maya Safmauer, and just other people in and around the team, what they had said when they said it, and trying to put all of the events in line, because it's clear that he had COVID while he was at the track. That's clear. They can say that they tested him all that they want. They can say that he did a test on Tuesday and it proved negative. Doesn't matter, mate. You were at the track and you had COVID. That's it. Now, I think the problem becomes, there's these mystery calls to mystery doctors who no one knows who they are. And it's not clear whether there was a conversation about COVID or just being sick. There seems to be some kind of recurring stomach issue, which is like, I didn't even know this, but if you look into it, they're like, well, that's a COVID symptom. It is. It just is. I kind of feel like there's this idea of, well, he got tested 5 days ago, so we'll just wait. If you're at the track and you show any symptoms, you should be getting tested. I don't care if you get tested twice a day. You should be getting tested. I mean, it's fucking ridiculous that he wasn't tested. So I think there's huge question marks to be answered. And the changing story, I mean, the team principal is saying, it's not classic COVID symptoms. It's just like flu-like symptoms. It's like, those are COVID symptoms. What the fuck are you talking about? And they're like, well, he's been tested a bunch of times and he failed. It's like, test him again, test him differently, get the FIA to test him, test. That's how you learn about this stuff. But it's really worrying. I think that he tested positive and it seems didn't tell the FIA until he'd tested, his test was clear. And he didn't come out positive, in the public and say, by the way, I won't be around for a week because I'm isolating because I just tested positive just now. Ridiculous stuff. And I mean, the fact that they waited until he did test negative just to announce it suggests that something was being covered up.
Yeah, we've seen this in other circumstances with other sports people and politicians and people who, once you get your positive tests and you're in the public eye, you start to be like, okay, let's control the narrative here and have a little think about what kind of timeline we want to create. It is disconcerting because, again, I think this just shows maybe a lack of respect for the other teams, and not just the other teams. There are a lot of people in that traveling circus of Formula One, journalists. We saw journalists tweeting about, like, I'm sure I interviewed him that day, or something happened. There's people they go home to their families, and they need to know. If he had come out as soon as he tested positive and went, oh, whoa, hey everybody, by the way, I know I sat out the race because I was sick, but also just look at this thing here. It says I'm positive. If you were around me for the last few days, you might want to get tested. You might want to isolate. But, that wasn't shared, so they couldn't do that. No, he cared about himself, and the team cared about. Well, I wonder how much, who's there is shared culpability here, but I think Lance Stroll is the most culpable. And because his dad owns the team, just does whatever he likes.
I worry
essentially.
About someone going right. That might mean isolating not just him, but whether they're sick or not, isolating all of the engineers that he's been interacting with, that whole side of the team, perhaps even the whole team, perhaps not running 2 cars this weekend, and then looking up at the championship board and going, pretty tight in that midfield. Fourth is up for grabs. Don't know that we want to risk that. Let's just, you isolate, but let's just get Hulkenberg on the blower, get him in, and everyone just shut up, and we'll get through it, get through the race, and then we'll worry about it later.
Let's not have those conversations with our sponsors.
Yes, I can only hope that that's not what happened, but holy boy, it really looks like that's what happened.
Yeah, and they're not doing much to assuage our decisions taken at the time, they probably didn't think through all of the implications. And that's the problem here. It's a pandemic. You do need to think about all of those other things at once. And I'm not saying that in future, any single time, hopefully as we start to move away from the pandemic, in next season or, 2022 season, I'm not saying that if someone, has a sore tummy, that they immediately have to tell everybody in all of the sport and we have to stop F1 and that person has to leave. I'm just saying that in the midst of the pandemic, while you're doing something extraordinary, which is running these races, it is extraordinary that we're doing it, especially as cases are spiking all across Europe, which is where they're racing right now. As you just said at the beginning of the show, we're about to race in Italy where new restrictions have come in and we probably shouldn't be racing there. Yeah. So this is, again, extraordinary circumstances and there's extraordinary requirements. And it does feel like, as Formula One teams always do in every way possible, bend the rules to suit themselves. And wow, why would you even watch Formula One this way? I'm painting it. No, that's not fair. But this just again, just feels like privilege. It just feels like Lance Stroll's like, well, I'll just do what I like because Daddy owns the team and fuck everybody else. It's cool. I need to get back in the car next week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not great.
Spot on. They've been in poor form, to be honest. They've already been reprimanded this year for illegally, using designs and stuff like that. They've had, championship points taken away from them. They've been, reprimanded and stuff. So and then both of their drivers, out of all the 20 drivers, 2 drivers who had COVID, both of them in their team. Something is rotten in the state of the Netherlands. That's an old reference to something else. Anyway, let's park that there. That's those topics all covered. I'm exhausted already, but I feel good that we covered all those important issues. Shall we get into the race recap?
Please.
Let's do it.
Let us race a bit. I gave him space.
Suck my balls, mate.
Let's hurry up and get out of here. We've got a race to do.
Move away from the mic, take a drink, swallow, deep breath. Don't let anyone hear you. Okay, so Portuguese Grand Prix. We didn't even mention this is the Portuguese Grand Prix, the very first one that we've had ever. Formula One has been here for some things, but not for a race. So that made it pretty
difficult
unique.
To know which hashtag to use is what you mean.
Definitely. Not that I was awake enough. I've decided because the race is just, for some reason, Formula One decides to keep making their races later. I'm going to tweet less and less and less and less and less. But I'm glad to see that you've been picking up the mantle a bit more and tweeting a lot more. Really appreciate it, because if I had to tweet at 1:30 in the morning, poor boy, no one wants to read the shit that my mind would come up with. I'll take the ones where there's an 8 p.m. start. You can have the ones where there's a 1 a.m. start.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I apologize for all of our followers and listeners when I used the Portuguese GP hashtag, which misspelt Portuguese. And I just tapped on the one that it suggested, and then I was like, no,
I hate that. Yeah,
fuck it.
He doesn't know.
Formula One needs to do a better job of organizing those hashtags, man. Jeez, all those marketing people involved, you'd think they'd be able to sort it out. But it was nice to be there. Cool new racetrack.
Really good. One thing that we could do, there was a whole lot of racing. So one thing we could do is a 30-second recap. It's my turn to tackle the race in 30 seconds. So are you going to wish me luck?
No.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it. Let's go. A little bit of drizzle on the track before the start meant that the soft tyres were the ones you wanted to be on. They were the ones that were up to temperature. Everybody else on mediums and hards was no good. That's why we saw Carlos Sainz rocketing to the front. That's why we saw Kimi Räikkönen basically overtaking everyone like he was playing F1 2020 on PS4. PS5's not out yet? No. PS4. Anyway, seconds. Oh shit. Lewis Hamilton went on to win. Valtteri Bottas, hopeless in second. Max Verstappen, just average in third.
4, 3,
Perez was doing pretty good, but then got passed by a bunch of cars at the last lap.
Well done. I might not wish you luck, but I will congratulate you.
Thank you. Thanks for not wishing me luck after I've already done it. That would be a bad omen. Yeah, you've got here that it was a roller coaster track. I like that. I was going to say that it was like the Loch Ness Monster, the kind of bumps on the Loch Ness Monster. It was really, I was not expecting those huge undulations. Drivers were saying someone came up behind me and I didn't even see him because of the crests. Couldn't see.
Yeah.
Incredible stuff.
You watch just like watching like not the close calls, but like how people's laps in qualifying were getting disrupted just because exactly, there's a lot of cars on the track and they'll come around a corner and like, they're not on the racing line, but it's just enough of a distraction to make me go like, woo, because your body just does kind of would be like just slight lift or, slight tweak of the steering wheel, all those kinds of things. So, I thought we did pretty well not to have a huge amount of crashes and really bad crashes, those kinds of things. We had some drain coverage issues that were fixed. I actually rushed home to catch qualifying.
Oh no, Dak, really?
And then and because I was like rushing home, I wasn't really looking at my phone and it was raining. So I didn't pull my phone out of my pocket and I wasn't really keeping track of Twitter. And then I like walked in the door. It's like, I've missed 10 minutes, at least I'll catch the end of Q1. And then somebody was just interviewing Lando Norris. And I was like, what's happened? Like, did he not make it to the track or something? Why aren't we watching?
COVID?
Yeah. So, that was they fixed it in half an hour, I guess. I just don't know why drain covers come up all the time, right? Surely someone, like if you're out there and you're an engineer, go and engineer a good drain cover system or drainage system for some tracks. You'll have at least 20 jobs that I can think of.
Yeah, at least. Isn't the idea that they weld them shut, but then the cars go over them and stuff happens. Even if driving past them would put force through it, and then they just come, if you don't do a good enough job, they just come open. I didn't see the incident. I don't know, but I mean, I can, well, I don't know. There's a very famous one in Monaco. You think they would just fly someone over? Someone probably could have driven from Monaco to there and fixed it.
Yeah, exactly. But,
in the opening lap though, it was a crazy opening lap. Lots of cars going everywhere. The one that I want to pull out is Verstappen and Perez, which, I know that it's first lap. I know it's the first couple of corners, but boy, when a car leaves the track and rejoins and hits another car, you've got to take a second look at it, don't you?
Yeah, and the fact that he left the track and came on and was like, it's still my position, by the way. It's like, no.
I'll just keep my foot down. Like, no, you can't do that.
That's not your spot.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, that was
quick.
easy.
I thought that was going to take longer, but never mind. I thought the other, let me lay this on you. There was a lot of commentary during the race from the usual suspects about DRS and how easy it was to overtake. Now, I thought, rightly or wrongly, that what it meant was there was a nice kind of flow to the race. And if you were Perez and you had to, pit early because someone hit you after rejoining the track and you were last, it was easy to get those overtakes done. So you could just run at pace and run your race. I know that we tune into this sport for overtaking it, and that's a fun part of it. But there was another part of it that I kind of enjoyed watching. It was just free flowing. So, it felt like there was more movement through the midfield, and people weren't just bogged down. I mean, as much as we want to see overtaking, it's not that fun to watch cars just follow each other either, because they're all bogged down. So, getting the balance right is tough, but I did kind of enjoy that element of it. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think it was. That hadn't occurred to me. That's a really nice way of putting it, is that the drivers got the moves done that they needed to get done so that we could actually get the competition between the drivers that were really competing.
Yeah. So they could get past someone and then just keep pushing, and in its own way, that was entertaining.
Yeah, I know what you mean. There was kind of less management and anger and getting bogged down and creating trains and those kinds of things. And those are sometimes the ins and outs of the sport. I think that...
Yeah, that's true.
Martin Brundle said it probably just need to be 100 meters shorter.
Yeah.
Something like that. Because I think one of the things that I saw constantly was that coming out onto the straight, that last turn before coming onto the straight, the trailing car could be very, very, very close because the corners were pretty slow coming up to that. They could be really close as soon as DRS opened, they're right behind them, which always makes it look like the move happens really fast. At other tracks where you might actually, you be within the DRS zone, but you're not that close when you come onto the straight, and it's always like, oh, they're going to catch them, they're catching them, and the driver that's overtaking swings to the inside at the last second. Whereas here, it was just like, he's right behind him at the start of the straight, switch that DRS on, pull out beside him, and halfway down the straight, they're past. So I think that, if the whole point of DRS is to get the cars next to each other going into the corner, this was probably a little bit too powerful. But I still think we still saw lots of defensive moves when the cars were more evenly matched. Yeah. We saw defensive moves, and it would take 1, 2, 3 laps to get by.
Some were a little bit borderline. I mean, well, when Hamilton pulled up behind Bottas, they both pulled over to the dirty side of the inside. That was one where it was like, why would you do that? But then you see other drivers. I think Perez did it, and definitely Ricciardo did it.
Definitely Daniel
Ricciardo.
Ricciardo.
Sort of getting a little bit more weavy and a little bit more, how many times are you going to move, bro?
Yeah. It's the one move and then moving back to the racing line. And if they happen too close to each other, if you're like, okay, now that I'm going to make my defensive move just before moving back to the racing line, it looks like you're weaving around, which you are. And it's scary when you look at it from the overtaker's point of view, because they're like, I was just about to get driven into.
But not only was the DRS so powerful, but the toe seemed to be really powerful. So I'm sure everybody who was weaving was trying to break the toe and break it early so that you're not weaving as the guy is making the move, and that you're weaving and then committing before you get to the braking zone. That would be the sort of defense, I'm sure they would say, that they're just trying to break the toe in that between stage. But, yeah, I mean, you watch enough racing. I mean, if this was my first year watching racing, I'd be like, it's fine. Who cares? Just drive. And if you get the overtake done, you get it done. And if he's weaving, bad luck. But, once you know a little bit more, you start to go, oh, you can't really do that sometimes. But they were really walking the fine line on that one. What else is there to talk about? There is talking about that kind of thing. There was the Stroll on Norris one. Should we talk about that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Stroll, what goes around the outside, probably thinks he's got the move done, and then whereas Norris kind of comes back at him, and the move wasn't done at all, and Stroll just kind of turns into him, which is why he got the penalty, right? I mean, this looks pretty clear cut, but Norris is obviously not happy about it.
I think the argument is who did anything wrong? Did Norris do anything wrong? Did Stroll do anything wrong? I think Stroll just arrived behind Norris with a whole bucket of more speed. Kind of had to make a split-second decision. Do I go around the outside or for the inside? Norris said, I don't know why he didn't go for the inside. It was right there. But, I mean, watching the replays, I was like, I wouldn't know which way to go either. And he just elected to go around the outside. Kind of just hung on to the edge of the track, kind of Albon-esque, and then rejoined. And Norris was on, I guess, what you would just call a racing line. Already had kind of gone through the corner at, average normal speed. To avoid a collision, he would have had to have slowed down way earlier. And I guess thinking, well, you're the one making the overtake. You're the one going around the outside. I don't have to do anything. When Stroll did, try to stay on track again, there wasn't enough room. So I thought it was maybe a little bit more. I don't think it was clear-cut Stroll penalty. But, I mean, yeah, I could see it both ways. You could argue, buy me a beer and I'll agree with you that it was Stroll's fault. That's what I'm saying.
I think it comes down to this question as well as and this is the fine lines. Like, when is the move done? Some drivers would be like, well, I'm half a car past him. That's my racing line now. So I expect them to get out of my way because it's my racing line. And the person who's being overtaken is probably like, move's not done. I'm about to come back at you. I'm going to swing to the inside and cut back through and, undercut you on the next corner. This overtake is not finished and is not cut and dry. So I think that, again, this is partly an experience thing, probably, two young drivers, but are racing. And, maybe if this was, Lewis Hamilton on, Giovinazzi, for example, Giovinazzi might have given up the place a little bit more easily and been like, well, I'm not going to come back at you because what? I'm not going to be able to keep driving behind you. That's not going to work. So he might have just, once Hamilton was kind of passing, he might have just given up on it. But because these two are racing and are close and are pretty competitive, neither of them is going to give it up. It's when one driver is just like, but that's my line now. I 75% of the overtake's done means it's done. So I'm the one in charge here. I'm the one who knocks. Get out of my way. So, yeah, I don't tend to like that much when drivers are like, well, the overtake was done. My wheels were just past his wheels. So, I'd won. I don't think that's right. And you see it, but, we always prefer it. I think as fans, we always prefer it where there is like a battle between two drivers that are giving enough respect, but are also, trying to challenge each other. this just looked messy. And I think this happens, I don't know, maybe it seems to happen every race that someone knocks somebody else's wing off or gives somebody else a puncture, front wing, those kinds of things, because they just don't know how big their cars are, it seems, or they expect a driver to do something that they don't. Yeah, it's too wide and too long. The cars are fucking massive. Make the cars smaller, you won't have this problem.
Micro machine racing is what we want.
That's all I want. I want go-karting. I'm just going to... Where's the go-kart Formula 1? That's what I want.
Love that we worked in a reference there to the cars being too wide. I want to talk about Sergio Perez because he had a great race despite the opening lap. He came out virtually last, if not actually last, and then just did a mega stint as he usually does on the medium tyres. They chucked him on the soft tyres at the end of the race, which ultimately was probably maybe not the smartest decision, but he was running in fifth, got overtaken by 2 cars at the end to finish 7th, earned himself driver of the day for that effort, and I thought it was a good one. Ricardo did a similar thing, I think. He ran really, really long on mediums and then put on softs at the end. It seems like everyone who started on softs did really well. It seems like everyone who finished on softs did poorly, and I think the disrupted practice sessions in the lead up to the race and then limited running, and then you've got to squash a lot into into FE3 and all the rest of it, just meant that, and a new track, weird cold conditions that they're not used to, all this led to just, no one really knew what the soft tyres were actually really going to do. Or they made an assumption that turned out to be wrong. Really good for warming up your tyres and getting a great start, really bad for running them for anything more than a few laps towards the end of the race. But yeah, a good race from Perez. And right up there, I want to talk about Pierre Gasly, who did really well. You've got a note here saying he might get promoted into Red Bull, making a strong case. Totally agree that he's making a strong case. The problem is, I believe Helmut Marko has just announced we're not going to be bringing Gasly into the Red Bull team.
Really?
Which is a bit of a bummer for him. I think they've got their eyes set on, a Perez or someone like that.
Yeah, they have been saying they're happy to look outside, right? The first time ever.
Well, that was the first hint, was they were like, if it's not Albon, it'll be someone non-Red Bull racing right now, basically, meaning AlphaTauri as well. I think they're also trying to set up AlphaTauri to get rid of Kvyat, and they're like, well, who do we bring in? Some junior racer, some rookie. Do we want to let that team, do we want to have a stable hand there as well as a rookie to continue getting points, earning money, just, keeping sponsors, growing this AlphaTauri brand, all the rest of it? That kind of has, I think, sealed Pierre Gasly's fate at that team, as much as it is the sour experience that he had when he went to Red Bull the first time. So it's looking like Verstappen and question mark TBA at Red Bull, and then Gasly and question mark TBA at AlphaTauri next year.
Verstappen and whoever wants to be a number 2 driver, which...
Well, I think Perez is the man, because he might not be the super aggressive, ultra talented, blisteringly fast, Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen. He's not on that level, but he's that dependable, I can get podiums when they're on offer. I can, match, if not follow home, Max Verstappen. And that's what Red Bull needs. So he actually is he's the driver they haven't had for years. The number 2 driver they haven't had for years.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It'd be nice to have some very experienced people at Red Bull, I think, in their mind, because really they haven't ever had just 2 young, inexperienced drivers at the team at once. And Max Verstappen is not that inexperienced anymore, but you consider what started as David Coulthard and Mark Webber, and then was Mark Webber and Vettel, and then Vettel and Ricciardo turned very quickly into Gasly and Verstappen. Yeah. It was like, oh, wow. That's basically Toro Rosso now. Like, you are essentially the Toro Rosso team. So yeah, I can see why a move for someone like Perez would make sense. But who does that leave, Rod, for the newly vacant 2 seats at Haas?
Well, this is a good question. The rumors are this guy called Mazepin, who I don't know anything about, and Mick Schumacher, who I only know one thing about.
But that will mean that Paul Grosjean and Per Magnussen won't have anywhere to race, Rod.
This is
what
true.
What will we do without them?
The rumors are that they're looking at, WEC and IndyCar, and that's an indication that there's not much interest from anyone else up and down the paddock, either because they've got drivers locked in or not looking for those kinds of
attributes.
attributes, qualities. Yeah, I don't know. There's another thing I was thinking about the Red Bull number 2 driver in terms of who do you put in there? Who would be successful there? Because it is such a poison chalice, as we keep saying. But they seem to be developing the car in a specific way that suits Verstappen's driving style. So surely if you've got a bank of people you can call on, the guy you want isn't just the fastest guy or, you know, the most marketable guy or whatever. You want the guy with the closest driving style to Verstappen, right? Surely.
That's a good
Doesn't
point.
it just
I
make
hadn't thought about
sense?
that. Yeah, it does. It really does. I'm saying Kekovic, and I know it makes sense.
Fucking hell. All right.
Yeah. Do we feel badly for Grosjean and Magnussen? I think Grosjean's had a pretty good run at Formula 1.
I feel bad for Magnussen, but not Grosjean. I don't know if that's weird, but that's just how I feel.
Yeah. No, I don't. I kind of feel nothing for them. I like that Grosjean keeps saying like they're so mean. They're doing this for monetary purposes. It's like, yeah, Formula 1 team. You're asking too much money.
Yeah, exactly. Have you met Formula 1?
Yeah. Exactly. Anybody else you want to talk about?
Oh boy, okay. Charles Leclerc doing much better than Seb Vettel. Obviously Verstappen doing much better than Albon. Another one of just those races, but I mean, it's kind of, I don't know that there's much to say. It's like it's kind of expected at the moment.
Yeah, I think that Ferrari and Vettel are just going through the motions at this point.
That is done.
And the fact that they've already broken up. It's like they live in the same house still, and Vettel is still just looking for his own place. You just can't, I know the leases crossover, but, you know, it's just kind of, I'm not here that often, really. You know, we only have to spend 3 or 4 days together a week. And, you know, I'm probably not going to, you know, chat to you all the time and stuff, you know, so we'll just get it through. You know, it's only a few more weeks, really, between now and December 13th or whatever. There's only 6-7 weeks. They can get through that, and then Vettel will be out and into the cozy embrace of the newly named Aston Martin team.
Absolutely.
Delightful.
I think we've done a great job summing up, you know, the week in F1. Let's move on to fantasy focus. Do you want to do the race or the league?
I got the league up right now.
You got the league up? I'll go for the race.
I got Romeo e Giulietta from Vincitore seems to be, and you don't fact check me on this, seems to be extending their lead over Ipithus and Grosjean's, George D. Smith's team. It's still incredibly tight, only 5 points separating second and third. But no movement, no change in the top 3 as far as positions go. Daniel Avocado from Steph did go up 1 position in front of Team Blue and Gold from 5th to 4th and 4th to 5th, respectively. Yes. But it is still, again, incredibly tight for 4th and 5th and 2nd and 3rd. Maybe with only very few races left, Romeo is starting to think about, or Team Romeo and Giulietta has maybe got one hand on the trophy and is like, you know what? Just need to be consistent now. So maybe there's an opportunity there to do something crazy. So yeah, that's the league.
Would agree. This week, the Portuguese Grand Prix, the results in the fantasy. I'll do the podium coming in number 3. That would be 3rd. Team Hypothesis by Hypothesis. Number 2, aforementioned Romeo e Giulietta by Vincitore. And then the only player to score more than 200 points this round, Team Slugworth by Modus Opposandi. She loves when we mention her. She always tweets saying, "Hey, thanks for mentioning me." That's what we do. I absolutely smashed it. Where has this performance come from? She's in the top 10 for the overall performers, but the usual suspects are right up there, including the aforementioned Team Daniel Avocado. I can see Steph down in 11th, right above me in 14th. Did pretty well this week.
Yeah.
I outperformed you, and I am up 2 places in the league into 39th. So my goal to get onto the first page,
it's coming.
I only need to do a little bit better than that for every single other race, and I might just do it.
I've held my position.
Well, that's all you need to do. 20th. You are where you need to be, my friend.
Yeah, exactly. Just live in the moment. Although people are just speeding past me, it seems, as well. Like MediGP and tertiary racing both went up 5 positions.
like Kimi Räikkönen after lap 3. Okay. Yeah.
God, if you haven't watched that video of his
it's worth watching.
Like first 2 laps, it is incredible. Like it's just like he's driving with children. He's just like, am I the only one who knows how to be a Formula 1 driver? It seems.
It's incredible. It's just one car after another. He actually loses a spot off the line and then regains 12. It's incredible.
Yep.
Just a shame he couldn't really hold on. But anyway, let's get into a little thing that we like to call the Superquiz.
We will accept a couple of questions. Should one only win one? Would one want to have won that one in round 1?
Can you repeat the question?
Little pauses. That's what podcasting is. Okay, Zach. I believe I'm reliably informed. Your turn to do a quiz, and I believe you've got one ready for me.
I've got a quick fire quiz for you, Rod. It's called the Haas Beans quiz.
Okay, it's
the newest edition.
Not about Lewis Hamilton versus Sebastian Vettel at all. I thought you were alluding to that earlier, but obviously not.
No, this is the Haas Beans quiz. I want you to tell me. I'm going to give you a fact
Okay.
or a tidbit, and you're going to tell me if it is about either Grosjean or Magnussen. That's Roman Grosjean,
cool.
or Kevin Magnussen. Does the quiz make sense to you, and are you ready to go?
Confirmed and yes.
Okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 questions. Question number one, Rod. His father made his F1 debut at McLaren. Was that Magnussen or Grosjean?
Sounds like Magnussen.
Correct. Question number 2. He is the grandson of a silver medalist in giant slalom who won that silver medal at the 1950 World Championships in Aspen.
I'll go Grosjean.
Correct. Question number 3. He is retired in 27% of his races.
Grosjean.
Yeah, that's Grosjean. Magnussen only 18%. 27%, more than a quarter of his races. He has retired. Now, that could be down to the car or
And 10
down
of
to
them
him.
he got hit by a driver who wasn't even anywhere near him.
All right, serious, boys. Come on. Question number 4. Renault came through with sponsorship funding to save his racing career in 2009 when he was working as a factory welder.
Magnussen.
It was Magnussen. How did you catch me on the double? That was the double twist. That was the Renault, maybe, perhaps. Anyway, question number 5. When Renault came back to F1 in 2016, he was their first driver choice.
Grosjean.
No, it was Magnussen. Grosjean was at Lotus. He'd been there the whole time, and then Lotus finally starts not paying people, and Renault's like, fine, we'll buy the team wholly, and then Grosjean was out off the Haas.
It's very true. Him and Julian Palmer.
Yeah, God, what a driver lineup. What a lineup.
The dream lineup.
All right, question number 6. Which driver did Pierre Gasly call the most dangerous guy I have ever raced with?
Magnussen.
It was Magnussen, and if I read my notes here correctly, I've written down Pierre Gasly. Thanks, autocorrect. I don't know how gassy he is.
That's a COVID symptom, I think, being gassy.
Get tested. Last question, Rod. Question number 7. Prison Break is his favourite TV show.
Trick question. This is Gunther Steiner.
No. Do you want to have a real guess?
Grosjean.
It's Grosjean. Of course it is.
Yeah.
Of course he loves Prison Break for whatever reason. But I'm sure the reasons are myriad. I think you got 6 out of 7 right.
Oh, amazing. So weird when you're looking your favorite show like 10 years ago and you're still trotting that out as the answer. Like when people ask you, when was Prison Break, like when was it like hot? And then when was it even produced last? Must have been ages ago.
Yeah, I can remember some Prison Break DVDs being in Amber and I's first apartment. I definitely haven't watched the show, but I think Amber liked it. I just don't understand what legs that show had, like any show of the time, right? It's like first season makes sense. They're trying to break out of the prison. But
yeah, I heard that. And then don't they break back in at one point?
I think the brother has to break in to break his brother. Oh, no, does the brother get put in jail so he can break his other brother out?
Oh, man, this sounds good. I have to watch it.
I can imagine there's probably more brothers at some point as well, like podcast.
They introduce a long-lost twin.
Yeah, exactly. That's all for the Haas Beans quiz. I don't know. I hope that the new Haas drivers have somewhat more illustrious careers.
Yeah, and maybe, when we find out who they are, we'll have to do quizzes about them and learn a little bit about them. That is our custom when you're out of ideas for a super quiz. Anyway, unbelievably, despite spending about half an hour just spouting verbal diarrhea about whatever, we're under the hour mark and we're still like we're on the brink of closing down. The only thing left really is a final thought. So anything popping up in your mind?
Did anything pop up in my mind for a final thought? Gee, I've had this whole podcast to think of one.
Well, yeah, but you had to do other things as well.
Do you have one?
Just this. Things are not good in the US. The Supreme Court judge has been confirmed. So that's happening, people. That's happening. Multiple generations of just fucking horrible decisions are headed your way. So look, there's an election coming up in a couple of days. If you haven't already voted and you live in the States and you can vote, please go vote. Get everyone you know to go and vote. And all the people who have done this to you, you may not be able to vote them out right now, but their time will come and that's the only way to make things better is to vote them the fuck out. So please go and vote. That's it.
I wonder if there was some cool... And, it's funny. I always think about, like, voting in the US, and you just get the I voted, like, sticker. Maybe we should have done, like, some Formula One themed voted stickers. But there are there's only a tenuous link with the US and Formula One. It's tricky.
But are you saying,
tricky.
so you live in the US, you're an F1 fan, you rock up to vote and you go, no, I don't want that sticker. I'm a Formula One enthusiast. And they reach under the table and give you a different sticker. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying.
And it's got Chase Carey giving you a thumbs up or something?
Yeah, that would be fine. Yeah,
okay.
like a big moustache on the I voted, and I don't know. There's nothing. This is the thing. This is the problem with America and Formula One. It's, as I said, tenuous links. There's an American-owned Formula One team. I don't profess to know exactly what Gene Haas's political affections, which way he puts them. But I'm sure it's. We probably don't share the same outlook, me and Gene Haas. I'm sure that's probably. I
don't want to know, just in case it's bad. So we've been doing shakedown in weeks where there's no races. There is a race next week, but then looking at my calendar, there's that race, and then the week after that, the only thing on my calendar is to put out the Greenway spin. So that means we'll be doing a shakedown, not next week, but the one after that. I'm just trying to clarify for people who maybe aren't across what we're doing with that.
That's after the US election is right, isn't it? Wow, we could do a whole podcast.
Yeah, well, it'll be our election special / getting Formula One into the Olympics revisited. Plus whatever other topics come up at the time. Probably more drivers getting COVID or something. I don't know. Zach, have you actually put forward a final thought yet? I don't know.
I haven't put forward a final thought.
Okay.
I think interestingly, my final thought is probably around the COVID situation because of that. Like I think Formula One showed very good flexibility getting the season off the ground, but have shown probably less flexibility about kind of closing it down when it needs to be shut down. I don't think it's super responsible for Formula One to be doing European races right now. And I know we're finishing off the season. We're talking about this pre-show that we're going to be finishing off with a Bahrain double header and then a race in Abu Dhabi. Again, we're not going to talk about Petro states and all that kind of stuff because we talked about that, but at least those are probably not going to have fans. Or you know what? They probably fucking will, right? They'll probably have corporate fans there. But I don't know what their caseloads are like there, all that kind of stuff. But it did just kind of seem like the sports around the world are kind of like this. Once they got them going again, the sports were kind of like, well, we're not going to, why would we stop this train?
Yeah.
Look, we're making it work in the worst of times. Let's just keep it going in through the blurst of times.
Well, this is a blip. Let's just keep going and not worry about it. But it's like, well, that's how these things start.
Yeah. And I think that we're moving into a phase now where, the sports and the people who are involved in making money from the sport are going to take this opportunity to find ways to squeeze even more money out of the sport, and maybe not in ways that suit fans. So we're seeing in the Premier League with games being put behind pay-per-view for I have to pay. If I wanted to watch the Arsenal game on Sunday, it was going to cost me £15. Instead, I donated that money to the Islington, was it the Islington Trust? No, it was the Arsenal Supporters Trust said go and give to Islington Helps or whatever it was. It's basically a local charity. And that charity has raised over £20,000 because of that, with fans being like, well, I could also pay £15 to watch the game. It doesn't have to be one or the other, but if I'm going to spend £15 on watching a football game, which is too much money for one match, that doesn't pass the Netflix test, as people say.
Yes.
And I already pay for sports coverage in my, internet and home cable package anyway. And you're filming it and you're putting it on those things. And I know boxing fans are like, I have to pay for every fucking boxing match that I watch. I know. But this is a slightly different situation. And we're seeing it with the AFL in Australia. The grand final was moved to a different state, quite rightly, because they had to run the grand final, but it was also moved to a night match. And then this will forever probably be how AFL will be now, that the grand final will just be at night. And that is only so that the viewership can be, that is only so that TV ratings will be higher. It's not better for fans. It's not better for the community around the sport. It's not better for the culture of the sport. It's just there so that the people who film it and put it on television and make money from it can make more money from it. So just be absolutely vigilant. This ties into Verstappen's comments that we talked about at the start of the thing. You are the fan of the thing. The thing exists to entertain or to make you feel a sense of community. And that's what sport is kind of for. So don't take these things lying down. You don't have to just take the sport as it is given to you if you think it's not being given to you in a way that looks after you as a fan or other fans around. So use whatever platforms you have. You can choose to boycott watching things or talking about it on social media. But if you can, when there are those opportunities, you can give to charity and you can find other ways to make your voice heard. Because this is a time when liberties are going to be taken, especially from Liberty Media probably, to make you less powerful in the sport.
I would add to that and say that there was a thing that blew up in Melbourne here recently. So not everyone would have heard about it, but this is a good example of like making your voice heard and it actually making a difference. We've had huge lockdown in Melbourne for months and months and months, and we're on the cusp of it going away, which is brilliant. But there's this horse race called the Cox Plate that they were planning to run, and all of a sudden they just decided, well, maybe we'll allow 1,200 people to go to this event, all connections of the races, managers, and whatever. And the community blowback was so huge and so vitriolic that people, who haven't seen their friends and loved ones for months and months are still denied, but these fucking rich pricks can go and watch their fucking horses run around. The outrage was just so loud and undeniable that they backflipped. They had to. They couldn't go ahead with it as planned. So don't think that if you think something is not right, don't think that you're only one person and you can't make a difference, because you absolutely can and you should. Yeah.
Exactly right. Good sentiment.
There's a bit of anger in that, but there's also a bit of hope, I think. So yeah, that's not a bad note to end on. Anything else to throw into the mix, Zach, before we wrap it up?
No, I just want that to be our motto for the show now. Super licenser, look at the culture of Formula One, full of a bit of anger and a bit of hope. That's pretty much it.
You can do that.
Yeah.
I'll be anger, you can be hope. That tends to be how it goes. All right, Zach, good talking to you, buddy. Thanks very much. And for everyone listening, we'll see you after the next race, which is going to be at Imola, I think, a real fan favorite, not one to be missed.
Another Italian Grand Prix.
And we'll talk to you about that. The Italian Grand Prix 3, the worst of the trilogy. If you follow the Godfather model.
Return of Imola.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, let's wrap it up there. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next time. Until then, my name's been Rodney.
My name's been Zach.
Talk to you after the Italian Grand Prix Part 3. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, yeah.